Hello everyone, my name is Ignat Georgiev. I'm a senior WordPress developer at SiteGround, and today I'll be talking at WPLDN about demystifying third-party APIs. Welcome to my talk about demystifying third-party APIs. I would like to start with a quick introduction of myself. My name is Ignat Georgiev. I'm a senior WordPress developer at SiteGround. For the past 3 years now, I'm a WordPress core contributor with over 6 years of experience in the WordPress space specifically. I am part of the team that is behind our plugins and internal and external WordPress sites. Some of our plugins are including but not limited to Speed Optimizer, Security Optimizer. They have more than 2 million active installations as of now. And one of them is the email marketing connector plugin, which, spoiler alert, inspired the talk for today. So I would like to start with a few questions, and you can help me with raising your hand if you know the answer to that. So who here knows what an API is? All right, quite a few people. For the people who don't know, API stands for Application Programmable Interface, which, if you're not tech, doesn't mean anything to you. But I can try putting it in simpler terms. Pretty much, it means an application hosted somewhere where you send some data to it in terms of parameters or data in general, or JSON, for example, and you receive a response. For example, let's say I have this weather API that I want to try out, and it gives me the temperature of different cities. So I send a request to it with the parameter city equals Sofia, Bulgaria, where I'm from, and it says 10 degrees. Then I change the parameter to London, and I get 9 degrees. Pretty much, it's based on what you send it. This is what's really important for the request. So why would you use an API? To answer this question, I would like to answer a further one. How many of you have websites that have something like a WooCommerce running, some e-commerce? Doesn't need to be an WooCommerce site. Awesome. Well, if you have such sites, you for sure have plugins for payments or shipping integrations, or let's say Google Maps integrations. All of those plugins actually work by using APIs. However, if you're looking to maybe have some functionality, most of the most popular APIs nowadays have already WordPress plugins, which is great. However, if you're working for some site that wants some custom integration, let's say you want to show how many transactions you have made for the past month for your payment through your payment gateway, then you would need to use an API, sadly, because maybe there's not a functionality like this in WordPress yet. So this was the end of my questions. So I would like to start with some backstory about the things I want to talk about. This is my recent experience with APIs, and I will try to use it in order to help you, guide you through what my mental process was throughout the development of this plugin. It isn't limited to that. You can use it in any context. It's just for the sake of the experience. More than a year ago, SiteGround developed a brand new product, which is called email marketing, which, as you could have guessed, it does email marketing stuff. It helps you build your newsletter. In general, it has AI, which helps you write it as well. It holds your emails that you have collected over your website and stuff like that. Really cool things. However, in the beginning, we didn't have any simple automated way to insert emails in it. So you had to import them through CSV. So what the team decided is that we want to create a plugin for it. And that plugin should be able to generate forms, display them, collect the emails, and send them to our email marketing tool. It can be through our forums or different forums that people use, like Contact Form 7, Gravity Forms, etc., etc. What we wanted to do is actually use the API that the email marketing has in order to send this the data that we want. So we start with navigating the API landscape. So for us, we had predetermined that we are going to use this API because we are developing the plugin specifically for it. However, in your case, the first question you should start with should be, what kind of functionality do I need? Do I need to, let's say, for example, show a map on my website that has a pinpoint of my business's address so people could find me better? Or would I like to have the Instagram feed of my product or of my company there? Or would I like, as I mentioned, a weather app? Stuff like that will help you determine which API do you actually need to use, and a quick Google search away will give you the right answer. Once you have that, you need to look into the API documentation. That's the first thing that you should do. If you've ever opened one, you know how intimidating it can be, as it uses a lot of difficult words to pronounce, but also to use. But generally, I start by looking at the documentation and finding the authentication part of it. For me, this is the first step of the journey on how to integrate different API. In our case, the email marketing API into the WordPress plugin. This is crucial in order to ensure that your requests are going through as needed and are going to your API account, because this is your way of showing that you are the person that you are trying to show yourself as. Since we don't have a public API documentation yet, I will start with a quick example from just a random API that I decided to use, which is Stripe. So as you can see, probably not, but if you can see, here is the authentication part of the documentation for Stripe. It involves generating and using secret API keys. Generally, this is the way that most APIs work. If you accidentally share this key publicly, let's say, for example, a GitHub repository or somewhere in your uploads folder, that could be pretty bad because someone could use it to make, in this example, transactions on your behalf, which is not that great. This is why it's crucial to understand how authentication works and to protect your credentials. For our case, for our plugin, we decided to go with a token, with a bearer token, that ensures that you're connected to the right website as it's linked to its domain. And it's only supposed to be used with that WordPress instance, and it's saved in the WP options table because it is safe enough for our use case. Look for examples. The best, the easiest, and the fastest way to get a request working for an API is to look for the examples in the documentation. These examples aren't just helpful, they are often the quickest way to get started, to get a request going, and really functional and up to your standards. Just grab a piece of code from the documentation, try it yourself, modify it to your business logic that you want to provide, and within minutes, you'll be having a request call on your website working. Pay attention to error codes. Error codes are an integral part of working with the requests because they provide you with a lot of information on what has gone wrong with your request. If there is something, and there's always something going wrong. For instance, when developing the email marketing plugin, everything ran smoothly until we did the first request. We didn't receive any info in the email marketing tool, and we were really surprised by that. So I started debugging because I knew that the request is something that we have worked on and it should be working. So I started debugging on collecting the data, how things work, why it's not working. And it seems that I have missed the part of my mental process to go through the debug log and see that I have logged an error, and it's a 403 error. So what does an 403 error means? Well, it means forbidden in the HTTP documentation. Most APIs use the HTTP documentation, while some have different codes for different stuff. So this will always be listed in the API documentation. If that is the case, please feel free to check out your API documentation that you're planning on using and see what error codes they use, how they use it, and when. And this will save you a lot of hours of head scratching on why something is not working or is getting data that is not correct. So once you have all of that going, I would like to go through the best practices, because APIs are incredibly powerful too, but however, they need to be integrated in a thoughtful and organized way. Otherwise, things can go really wrong. And I would like to go through a few of the best practices that I have stumbled upon. Optimize the number of and frequency of requests. While having a working request is great, the first thing that you should go to once you have that going is trying to optimize the number of requests. What does that mean? Well, it means that, for example, if you are sending data on each user visit on your website, this will overload your server, and of course, it will overload the server that you're sending the data to. If in our case, we decided that certain types of submissions of emails are not that urgent, meaning that, for example, we have an integration where we connect to the comment forum, you send out a comment on a blog post, you click you click on the checkbox, and all right, it's working again. Awesome. You click on a checkbox and it adds it to the newsletter list. However, imagine if that's a block with a lot of users, that will get flooded really, really quickly. So this is something that APIs call rate limiting, on which I will expand on later. But rate limiting basically means that you have a certain amount of requests that you can do in a time period. And if you do more than that, well, then they don't go through. So when we decided to do that, we decided that we are going to just save those emails in the WordPress database. And once we have collected some and we have added the cron, then the cron will go twice daily and will send all the emails at once in order to eliminate the need for really more complicated logic in order to minimize the amount of requests. So if for example, you're doing a get request, let's say you want to get some data from an API, and it doesn't really change that much, what I would suggest is to use caching in your favor. So caching the responses of the API calls that you're doing is great, unless not done right. But if, let's say, for example, you are pulling data that should be changing for, let's say, an hour or two, you should cache the data for that period of time and then serve it to people in order to avoid, again, the rate limiting that you could face. Yeah, I can just move my laptop a bit. Should be. All right. Yeah, well, this is my example. So pretty much we are getting the user data and saving it. If we can really do a cron, we send it anyway, but if we can, we use cron for that. Another thing that you should look into when developing a plugin like that or an integration like that for WordPress is using WordPress hooks and functions. So one of the best features of WordPress is its ability to integrate with APIs and a lot of other stuff through its built-in functions. For example, when we were working on the plugin, we used WP remote request, which is a great function to use when connecting to an external URL, getting data or sending data. By leveraging WordPress hooks, like I said, for the comments, for registrations, you can trigger the API calls to trigger on different user activity and really automate all of your processes needed in order to make sure that your data is sent on time. As you can see here, we have added an action on the register form where we do the request. Develop a proper development cycle. What I mean by that is if you are developing such functionality, you should always, as with everything, make sure that you have a proper development cycle set up with a local environment, staging environment if possible, and good CI/CD integrations, a lot of testing, because working with third-party APIs could lead to a lot of bad things happening, even because they're out of your control, and some of them work by are being paid by the request. So you should really make sure that everything is working correctly before you deploy it live and let your users run away with it. Despite all of those stuff that I said, things can always go wrong, especially when dealing with services that are out of your control. So I would like to focus on common issues and debugging strategies that we have faced. One common issue that we faced is what I said earlier with authentication, as well as rate limiting. Let's say, for example, you have an API that can do, let's say, 1,000 requests every 15 minutes. If you don't do the stuff that I mentioned earlier, well, then you're going to hit the rate limit and possibly leave some people on your website without a response from the server, which is not that great. So stuff like rate limits, authorizations should be always looked into before going live and making sure that everything is working. However, even though you're live and everything is going great, the API could change always. So what I suggest is the debugging strategies that I will explain in a bit, because it's something that we have faced earlier, as I mentioned, with authentication. If we didn't have the correct error logs, we couldn't really find the issue. So what I suggest you using when you are developing such functionality is to use error logs or any other type of logs that fits your PHP or your WordPress or your use case in general, and really enabling your WP debug or WP debug log as well, constant, in order to get the logs in the correct folder and file in order for you to see them and really save yourself a lot of time. Why this is not working? It was working an hour ago and stuff like that. Security first. Even though this is the last thing I will be talking about regarding APIs, I believe that security is actually the first thing you should look into before going live. It is paramount when dealing with APIs, since a lot of things can go wrong, and a lot of APIs handle sensitive data like payments, like personal information, access tokens, and stuff like that. Secure authorization is one of the things that you should look into when dealing with security issues. In our case, we are using a bearer token, which is pretty much a standard non-changeable token for that website for now. And this is due to the fact that we're not really dealing with that much sensitive information. What we do with our API is just send an email to it. So if you're dealing with, let's say, payments or addresses or stuff like that, what I would suggest is using something like OAuth 2.0, for example, because it pretty much does the same thing. However, it is limited to a certain time period, meaning that if somebody manages somehow to get your key, they're able to do requests, let's say, for a minute or 2 or 5. And once that minute is done, they have to take it again, or they can do any more requests, which could really save you a lot of issues and money and problems. Here you can see how the authorization works on our end. Basically, a bearer token is just a string that gets applied to the headers. Validate and sanitize data. This is something really crucial, again, when working with third-party APIs and with user content, especially in our case, since we are giving information to our API and we are receiving as well. So we always look into escaping every possible entry as we should. You can use WordPress functions for that. They are awesome for it. You can use escape HTML or escape attribute or WPKSES. These are all functions that will help you sanitize and validate data before outputting it on the front end or before entering it into the database. Here you can see that we are also using filter var, which is another PHP function which helps us validate an email. It's really great. Under the hood, it uses a regex and just make sure that this is actually an email. Minimize exposure. In our case, what we decided to do is because we didn't need that much communication with our endpoints and stuff that could be changed. It didn't really fit our goal for the plugin. We want to expose as little endpoints as possible and request types as possible. This is crucial in order to ensure that there aren't any endpoints that someone shouldn't see. Stuff like the number of contacts in your email lists or future newsletters. We avoided showing that in endpoints and avoided doing requests to such endpoints in order to be more sure about our integration. In conclusion, I want to say that the APIs are like the plumbing behind modern websites. They enable powerful functionality from payment processing to integrating social media feeds or maps or a lot of functionality. And it's making your WordPress sites far more dynamic and interactive for the users. And by understanding how to navigate API documentation, how to follow integration best practices, prioritize security, I hope that you'll be well equipped to tackle any API documentation that you want and then any API integration that you want with confidence. APIs should not really be something that you should be avoiding to use. They're a really nice tool and should be really looked into if you are doing this professionally. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey and my first talk. I hope you're living with a bit more clarity on how APIs work and how we work with APIs, at least in this case. And again, I'd love to hear your questions, experiences, or challenges that you have with APIs. Yeah, thank you.